All right, so we love doing these deep dives for you, and we're so glad you sent this in. Some recent budgeting tips that you found for 2025, and so that's kind of the jumping off point for today.
Yeah, and I think these are really interesting because a lot of times with this stuff, it gets really complicated and in the weeds. And I think these tips are really, good for almost anybody to kind of wrap their head around.
Yeah, I think the overall theme is kind of like simplicity, right? Like making it feel like you can actually get a handle on this. And so we're going to pull out sort of like five key strategies that we saw that we thought were really interesting.
Exactly. So we're going to be talking about the 50-30-20 rule, automating your savings, the envelope system, using budgeting apps, and then also tackling that high interest debt.
Okay, so let's start with that 50-30-20 rule because I think it's one that a lot of people have heard of, but I'm not always sure like how to actually implement it. So basically the idea is 50% of your after-tax income should be going towards needs.
All right, so your needs can be things like your rent, your mortgage, your groceries, transportation, utilities like your must-haves.
Yeah, the things you can't really live without. Then 30% is for your wants.
Yeah, so that's going to be things like, going out to eat, entertainment, travel,
Yeah.
things that you don't necessarily need to survive.
Yeah, like the fun stuff. And then the last 20% is for saving and debt repayment.
Right, so that's paying down those credit cards,
Yeah.
student loans, putting money into your savings account, your 401k.
So, I mean, like, when you look at that split, like, does that feel realistic? I mean, or like, how do you think people should kind of wrap their heads around those percentages?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good starting point.
Yeah.
I think it's important to remember that it's not like a hard and fast rule. Like if you live in a really expensive city, your needs might be more like 60%, and that's okay.
Right.
I think it's more about understanding the basic idea and then adjusting it to fit your own situation.
Yeah. Figuring out where you're at now and then how you can maybe tweak things. So, let's talk about automating savings because this was one of the tips that I thought was super smart just because it takes the decision out of it every month.
Absolutely.
So basically, you set up an automatic transfer from your checking account to your savings account right after you get paid. So you don't even see that money, it just goes straight into savings.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of playing tricks with yourself, right? Because if you don't see it, you're not going to spend it.
Exactly.
And it's really one of the best ways to make sure that you're saving consistently.
Do you have like a certain percentage that you recommend people try to automate?
I think it really depends on your individual goals,
Mhm.
but even starting with like 5 or 10% of your income can make a big difference over time.
Yeah, okay. That makes sense. Okay, so now for something completely different. Let's talk about the envelope system, which honestly I hadn't heard of in a while. But it's basically you use cash, you divide it up into these envelopes labeled for different categories like groceries, entertainment, gas. And then once the cash in that envelope is gone, you're done spending in that category for the month.
Yeah, it sounds a little old school.
Yeah,
I know.
yeah.
But there's actually something really powerful about it because you're physically handing over cash,
Right.
and it just makes it feel a lot more real than swiping a credit card.
Yeah, you see it disappearing.
Yeah, you actually have
Yeah.
to make decisions like,
Yeah.
okay, do I want to spend this money on this or do I need to save it for something else?
Yeah, so it really forces you to kind of confront those spending habits. So then on the other end of the spectrum, there's budgeting apps, which obviously are super popular these days. So things like Mint or YNA, which can track all of your expenses, they can categorize them, help you set financial goals, and even remind you about upcoming bills.
Yeah, I think those are great for people who are, comfortable with technology and want that really detailed overview of where their money's going.
And it can pull in from all of your different accounts,
Yeah.
right? So you can see like you're checking your savings, your credit cards all in one place.
Yeah, exactly. And it can also like analyze your spending and show you trends like where you might be overspending and where you might be able to cut back.
Okay, so last but not least, we have to talk about tackling high interest debt,
Hmm.
which, can feel really overwhelming. But I think one of the tips in here said something like, it's like plugging the biggest leaks in your financial boat.
Yeah, I like that analogy
I did too.
because it's true. If you have a lot of credit card debt or other high interest debt, that interest is just eating away at your money.
Yeah, you're basically throwing money away.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's really important to prioritize paying that down as quickly as you can.
So, I mean, obviously everyone's financial situation is different, but are there any kind of like general tips for how to start tackling that high interest debt?
Yeah. I mean, one common strategy is the debt snowball method, where you focus on paying off your smallest debts first to kind of build momentum, and then you roll that money over to your next biggest debt and so on.
Okay, so it's kind of like a psychological thing.
Exactly. You get those quick wins, and it keeps you motivated.
So we've covered a lot of ground here. The 50-30-20 rule, automating savings, the envelope system, budgeting apps, and prioritizing high-interest debt.
And I think what ties all of these together is that they're really about taking control of your finances.
Yeah, being proactive.
Exactly. Not just letting your money manage you, but you managing your money.
So I think that's a great takeaway. And hopefully this deep dive has given you some ideas that you can actually use in your own life.
Absolutely. And, it doesn't have to be all or nothing. Just pick one of these things and start small.
Yeah, one little change can make a big difference over time.
Exactly. So what's one thing that you're going to try?
I think I might try that envelope system, actually. I'm kind of intrigued by it.
Yeah, I think it could be a good one to try. So what about you out there listening? What are you going to do?